Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Outlander Season 1 Episode 6. It's called The Garrison Commander. So full spoilers for the episode, as always. And obviously we were left with the cliffhanger last episode of, is Claire going to play nice and sort of make it clear that Dougal and the rest of them aren't like holding her captive. Which technically they were at one point and kind of are, but it's
yeah.
just...
I mean, technically they kind of are. Yeah, she's not allowed any freedoms, so
yeah, there's a bit of a grey area, but ultimately, she's bonding with them. She's bonded with some of them, especially the last episode. It felt like she was finally starting to feel a bit more included, and that's when it's immediately challenged, which is good from a dramatic point of view. It's the right time to do it. Mm-hmm. And she does say, "Oh no, I'm a guest of the Clan Mackenzie," and the soldier's like, "Well, fair enough, but I'm sure the local lord or whoever his rank was, he would like to
commander."
Was he the commander, or was Jack the commander?
No, he was commander. Jack's underneath him.
Okay. Well, they kept calling him
Jack's captain and he's general.
Yeah, they call him a general, which I guess is also a commander, but I just, because they never used the word commander, I got...
Yeah, but general's above captain.
No, I know that, yeah, true. So it's okay, you're going there. And I think what actually surprised me about this, two things surprised me about this episode. One is that it mostly takes place in one room. Obviously it dips in and out a little bit, there's some flashbacks here, but it mostly takes place in one room in a series of conversations, which is not a knock against it. I think it's pretty well done, the way it plays all these out. And then the end of the episode sort of gave us a big development in a way that I was not expecting, and I'm kind of surprised by it. So, we can talk about it.
I was really into this one. I think this might be my favorite episode yet.
It definitely has the most sinister undertones.
I think even before it got sinister.
Well, actually, overtones maybe a better word. Not really that under the radar. This, but go on.
Even before it got sinister, I'm a sucker for a good monologue, and this has a great monologue.
Oh yeah, it's got a monologue or two. Yeah.
So I was into it for that.
I do like a good monologue. I think it played fast and loose with where people's heads were at during certain scenes, and like, is someone considering making a certain choice, perhaps, that kind of thing. Are they tempted by what's been dangled in front of them, particularly Claire? And you're kind of like, and she does ultimately sort of remain loyal and always kind of sticks up for the Mackenzies every time she kind of can, and it to the point where she sounds like kind of like traitorous to all the English people in the room because she's been a bit too sympathetic. But there's a lot of that stuff playing throughout, and there was even a moment where I'm like, is she being like genuine to Jack here in some way, or is this just like her playing the hand she's dealt to just get out of this as quickly as possible? And there was a moment where I'm like, I'm not actually like, obviously this man attacked her and tried to rape her when she first saw him, and there's a point in this episode where obviously that's always on her mind and it's the first thing she thinks of when she looks at him. But there's a point later on when she's talking about, oh, maybe there is a good person down in there, and I was thinking of it in the terms of she kind of wants to believe that because she knows that her husband is a descendant of this man. So in some level, especially just in even though it doesn't mean anything really, she's looking at her husband's face as she's talking to this monster, so it's kind of like she wants to believe there's something. I was like, how much of this is there any truth to what she's saying right now, or is this purely just like the fear and the tears and her trying to like play the game until its conclusion?
And it's really well delivered. And then on top of that, obviously we'd already had him as a villainous character with his introduction.
Mm-hmm.
But now it kind of really goes all in and makes him the villain.
Oh, he's a psychopath. He's an absolute psychopath by the end of this episode.
Yeah. And I'm here for that.
He talks
as a villain.
He talks about lashing Jamie in the flashback as a work of art as he saw the flesh hanging off of his back, and I was like, you sound like Norman Bates or like Hannibal Lecter all of a sudden.
Yeah, it was insane, but incredibly well delivered as well.
And them not like holding back on the visuals of Jamie's back in this flashback did not it only helped that selling him as a psychopath, because he had bits of skin just hanging off. It was just blood pouring out his back at one point. The whole thing was disgusting. To the point where when the English soldier faints, which just motivates Jack to be worse, and like sort of, make sure no one's laughing now kind of thing. I actually was like, you know what? I believe someone fainted. I actually believe if you were standing in front of this in real life, you may actually faint.
Yeah, I think it's only more surprising that more people didn't, if anything.
Which is actually a nice payoff, because earlier in the episode, the English doctor makes a dig at Claire for being a woman. He's like, "Oh, you sure you won't faint when we start, amputating this arm?" And obviously she doesn't. She's a professional. But it's actually kind of a nice payoff to that, is that later on this like tough English soldier is like, oh no,
Yeah,
I can't take it anymore. Oh, I'm all flustered. But yeah, so last episode you opened with there's finally a good Englishman in this show. There's a good English person who's not evil, and I just want to say that every single English person, well, with the exception of maybe the guy who was shaving Jack, who clearly didn't want to do anything he was being told to.
Yeah,
like. They're just like when Dougal goes out of that room and they all just start being racist is the best word I can use to quickly explain it. It's not the exact same thing, obviously, but I'm just going to say that for quickness sake. Like they're making fun of his accent.
It's definitely not good. There's definitely, like, again, I think it might be that same one who stuck up for Claire last episode, who is like starting to translate and being like, starts like, hey, it's not that bad. It's clearly English, understandable. He obviously joins in the jokes a bit.
Yeah, he chimes in at least one point. Yeah, but they basically says, do they ask what they can call him, and he's like, I'm Dougal Mackenzie, Chief Mackenzie, whatever, and they just start doing the I didn't understand a single word he said, and starts talking about the King's English, all that bollocks. And what's funny is this is something that actually, amongst a certain type of snobby prick, does still persist to this day. I think most Scottish people who have interacted with some English people will probably have a story of someone claiming they can't be understood, even though they're speaking straightforward English.
That's probably true, but also in perhaps that English person's defense, some accents are really damn thick and hard to understand if you're not accustomed to them.
Oh, it's all
as Claire points out here. Hey, the Newcastle accent's no treat either.
I did love that, because the Scouse accent is stupid.
That's not Scouse.
Oh, sorry, not Scouse. What's the
Geordie?
Geordie, thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
It is stupid.
Well, both Scouse and Geordie are stupid. Just to clarify,
and Brummy as well. Let's just throw that in there too.
Right. It's all about tone. There's nothing wrong with saying I didn't quite catch that. You spoke really fast. Whatever. There's nothing wrong with that, right? That's perfectly fair. But that's not the attitude of which these lines were delivered here. This was mocking. Yeah. This was these savages, and we're in this godforsaken land, and we're stuck with surrounded by this filth and all that kind of talk. It was kind of a surreal thing to watch, because I like Scottish.
Are you trying to say that the English haven't changed in a few hundred years?
For the most part, the English have changed, I will happily say. But what was surreal about this is that I've never watched something before, I guess with the exception of Braveheart technically, but even that is kind of handled differently. This is the first time I've ever watched something where a Scottish person is the victim of like bigotry in something, like in this kind of casual mocking way,
as opposed to being the butt of the joke that we're supposed to be in on.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. It was like, I guess because a lot of this is a bit more obviously old school, right? And like, yeah, there's like jokes between English and Scottish people most of the time, and for the most part it's just stupid jokes and there's nothing to it, right? You'll occasionally run into a prick here or there who is snobby and stuck up and looks down on people, or whatever, and you'll hear maybe some similar comments to this, but for the most part it's just all a bit silly nonsense,
just a bit of banter,
right? But this was just really weird to see this, and it be like this really malicious thing, and sort of watch it from a present day lens of never really having to suffer anything remotely like this, but kind of oddly feeling like triggered by it, because I'm like, wait a minute, what the hell did he just say? The prick! Like, getting a little, like, I don't know, I guess just sympathizing with Dougal, which most reasonable people probably do, but there's something kind of weird about it watching it as a Scottish person and being like, stab him right now. It's kind of the feeling. So I guess what I'm saying, this like tickled a nerve that I don't think I've ever had tickled in any media before that I've ever watched, because it was just so like not relatable, but like I felt some sort of kinship to the character on the screen in a way that I wouldn't normally, because it was particularly targeting my heritage, I suppose. And I'm not someone who really cares all much about heritage as a concept, but like just the idea that, what? Because yeah, most Scottish people have heard a passing comment here or there. If not from English people, you might get it from a snobby American occasionally. You might get it from a snobby whatever, right? There's people everywhere that are pricks, right? But
yeah,
that's just
there happens to be a high proportion of them in England. Is kind of what you're getting at.
Yes, especially in this time period.
Yeah.
Especially in this time period. So that was a very fascinating, just to watch Dougal stand there and have to take it because he's like outnumbered and has to, because we've gotten to know Dougal to a point where we see him as this tough guy who's in charge. So seeing him sort of like be tested in this way where he's keeping his cool, and he does have a couple of comments, like the Lord, the general says, he misses not hearing like a proper London accent, right? When they're joking about other English accents, and Dougal hits out with, if you wanted to speak to Londoners, you should have stayed in London.
Yeah.
And everyone goes quiet. And, actually...
the one guy starts translating. Like, no, I got that one.
Well, that's the other truth part is like, pricks like that will pretend not to understand you until it's something insulting, and then conveniently they know they've been insulted, so they can pick the fight. Very selective in what they understand. Yeah. So you've got that element to it. My favourite line here, though, is because obviously this was also testing throughout the episode, the kinship that's kind of forming between Claire and Dougal, right? And that's something we've been kind of analysing with a keen eye like since the start of the show, is the moment where they're getting sort of heated and Claire steps in and tells them they're both acting like children. And the general kind of sort of laughs a little bit and goes, oh, yes, we should all follow her example. Oh my, a woman who isn't afraid to tell a man what to do. And Dougal just kind of goes, aye, she is that, or something. He has this little comment, and it came off in this really playful way where he does know her well enough now that it felt like a genuine little aye, she is that, and like you'll learn all about her as you get to know her.
It's like, have fun.
Yeah, but so I enjoyed that line. I thought that was a good little moment. But Dougal does eventually leave, and she's left there.
He goes downstairs to the bar.
Yeah, because it is a Scottish village, obviously. It's just under control of the Redcoats. And I think it's really interesting, we've been up and down on Claire's narration throughout the show, but I think it's interesting in this episode where we hear at the start say, oh, it's hard not to kind of feel like, oh, I'm back with the British Army, which is kind of what I was a part of, even though it was vastly different by the time she was in it. She feels like some kind of oh, maybe this is the beginning and the end of this, because she's not throwing Dougal under the bus, she's not throwing the clan under the bus, but she does also see an opportunity here to be given passage to Inverness, which could lead to her going home, and it seems like they're kind of willing to go along with this, at least until Jack walks in and starts questioning things and raising a fuss and all sorts.
Yeah, with his dusty jacket.
Yes, which is interesting that the dynamics between him and the other characters in that scene tell us a lot about him versus them, in that it's not that he's any less devoted. If anything, he's more devoted and more, obviously more vicious than they are as Redcoats, but it's that he's not this phony guy who's just all about the decorum, because these other guys, and he says this later on, he's like, oh yeah, that general's a prick, he's all show and flat, he's all pomp, he's not a real soldier.
He's a captain, so he obviously has a reasonable rank, but everyone in that room kind of looks down and like, oh, he's just out there,
I mean, how many people who have got high ranking positions in the military have got them because of either nepotism or because they know the right people, or
maybe Claire's husband.
It's a good point. That's a good point. It's because I was thinking about this when I was watching the episode as well. Is like, however long this lasts, if she ever does get back to her husband, given how evil and monstrous this Jack dude is, how is she ever going to look at her husband's face again and not just see this psycho?
Yeah, it's just presumably ruining that relationship forever.
Yeah, and maybe she's not accepted that yet. She's not really accepting she's got feelings for Jamie yet, even though she clearly probably does. But
yep.
Whereas Jamie, he knows he does. He's all about it. But what's interesting about this is a series of conversations in this room once they get there. First with Dougal there, and all that stuff plays out, And I think at that point in the episode, if obviously they talk about the English and what they've done and all the rest of it, but I think this is the scene where if you're a viewer who knows nothing about this history, and I wouldn't say we know a lot about it, we have some broad strokes just because you hear things, but this is the scene where it's like, okay, there's a reason why we're siding with the Scottish characters as the heroes in this, even though both sides are guilty of some vicious shit, which is also something that's brought up when Claire criticises the killing of the Scotsmen that were up in the crosses.
Yeah, because they talk about some English soldier who was decapitated and left holding his head.
Yeah. And I'm not actually justifying that action, but I immediately said, yeah, but what did he do something that inspired that retaliation potentially? Because given how cruel some of these guys are,
I would say it's very possible on a personal level that he didn't, but he was just he's representative of the army, right?
Very possible, and it's the sort of thing where
I think they said he was a private, which means he probably didn't have enough rank to really do any of the impressively bad stuff.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But again, we're hearing this only from the Redcoats. We're hearing this only from them.
British officers. Yeah.
Yeah. So
English officers specifically.
They're painting it purely as this evil act, where it's like, yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty bad, but like, what was the rest of it? And likewise, it's like, yeah, what did the two Scottish guys do? We don't know that either, but we just see like what happened in the aftermath of it. So both of them look, and I think that's what I liked about Claire's reaction to that is like, yeah, both of these things are awful. Like neither one of these things should have happened. So
yeah, and she's clearly right.
Yeah, she's this modern, thinker, right? She's thinking with a modern lens, and what's so sad about it is when she starts questioning some of these things, like some of them just get all sort of pompous and sexist and say, "Oh, this is why you never talk to a woman about politics or morality or whatever." And
they say politics. She's like, no, this is morality. Trying to prove a point that this isn't just politics. There's beyond that. It doesn't matter which side you support. You should not be doing this.
Yeah, and this of course is a time where, much like our favorite character Father Bain, they do not like to be told that what they believe in is in any way flawed or like doesn't work, or that there's changes that should be made.
No one likes Ivan now.
The idea that if they have to admit that anything they've been committed to is wrong, like it's that sunk cost fallacy. Well, now I'm going to do anything in my power to silence you so that I don't look like a fool.
Yeah.
So you got all this at play. So you got that conversation that plays out, and it's all very entertaining. And then everything seems to be hunky dory until Jack comes in. We talked about how obviously he clashes with the general. He's
very concerned about his wine.
Yeah, he recognizes Claire, and Claire recognizes him, but they both play it off as so they don't have to explain why they recognize each other. But then, of course, things get a bit more sinister, and we get the big long monologue and all that when Jack's alone with her and wants to speak to her, and
question her.
And it's all very tense right from the get-go. It kind of feels like he doesn't believe a word she says. And to be fair, we know that it is a lie. Technically, he's right.
It is, but she spins a pretty good story.
Yeah, she talks about how she was having an affair with a Scotsman and she ran away, and that's why she was in her underwear when he found her, and so on and so on. And it's an okay version of the story, but he doesn't believe it, right? There's a lot of times in this episode where he makes a turn. He does it twice effectively, where he draws the picture of her on the handkerchief or the tablecloth, yeah, and he's like, yeah, I'll call it, Beauty of Lies or Lies of Beauty, whatever he says. And that's where he sort of reveals, yeah, I've not believed a single word you've said. But then he does it again when he's sort of like talking about being a good man deep down and maybe he can make the right choices. And then, it's even worse this time because he punches her in the stomach. And it's this, literally a gut punch. Like it is literally, that's what it is.
It is, because you're like, maybe it's starting to work. Because there's a lot of this back and forth where he'll be questioning her and she'll go along with it a little bit. And then he'll be like, all right, what was your maiden name? And then she'll completely just abandon answering it entirely, not even trying to come up with a name, and just throws herself into another story, just trying to distract him.
I think what was interesting about this, because I mentioned earlier about how I was thinking about, is she kind of like being at least partially genuine, if maybe not because she really believes it, because she wants to believe it. But part of the reason why I was constantly like thinking about that side of it was, this man tried to rape her, And like when he first says something to the effect of, yeah, I'd like to apologize for that day, and I hope I get to reveal the real me to you at some point. Be honest with you. My first thought was, no, you're a rapist. Like no matter how much you're trying to convince her otherwise, if I was her, and I imagine most people in her situation will never feel ultimately comfortable with you because of what you did.
Yeah.
And that was in my head the entire time he was telling these stories and talking about him being a good man. I can never shake the idea that no matter how much you might say this, I don't see this as the beginning of some long redemption story for you. It could be interesting if you try and play it that way, maybe, but I don't really believe it. And if
they choose to go down the other route, obviously.
Oh yeah, it's immediately no, he is evil, and it's like
he's so much worse than we thought he was.
And this is after we've even seen the fact, because they try and do that he might have some redemption in him after we get the story of Jamie being lashed, and
which was again, he's like, yeah, I remember that. I gave him his punishment, and I'd have stopped at his 200 if he'd just, screamed out to the crowd. Made a point of showing that he was in pain.
It was about breaking him.
Because he was stubborn, he had to have more, and it's like, yeah, and then he just keeps going and going.
That makes you sound like a stubborn child, not him.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
was horrific.
Yeah, because to the point where like the English soldiers, we said one fainted, but they were all clearly horrified by what he was doing. Like they're all scared shitless of.
Yeah, it's like he did the 200, which was the punishment. Which I'm not going to say fair enough, but at least there was some sort of justification for that.
It was no, the punishment was meant to be 100, and he wasn't happy because it wasn't him that did the first 100. Right, so
I thought it was 200, and then he did another 100.
No, he did 100, and it was like another guy who usually does them. Whoever the dedicated lasher man, right? He did the 100, right? And because he never cried or showed signs of pain and sort of took it like a man, effectively, right? Not that I'm saying there's any like if you're being whipped 100 times, there is no shame in letting out a cry. It's okay. Right? I'm not judging anyone, but he was strong. He wanted to make a point and not do it. He had his pride, and because of that, he wanted to prove a point by saying, "Well, because of that, you get another 100," and he gives him another 100. So his back's already scarred to shit. They're clearly he was clearly bleeding recently, right? They're still red. They're not bleeding, but they're red.
And it's at the end of this 100 where he's like, "Still, well, I guess we'll keep going then."
To the point where he's actually like, he's panting because he's tired from whipping him.
Yeah, he talks about how he didn't really pace himself because he thought, 100, that's easy, I can get through that. And then he got to the end of it and realized, well, I need to do more. So he was kind of exhausted by the end of this.
But it gets so horrific because by the time he's whipping up at the end, it's just like a mass of soft flesh. There's no, there's no like actual skin. It's just a mush of red and goo and stuff. And I mean, I have no idea at which point like you just stop feeling it because there's just like no nerves left to actually take any pain in, if that's even a thing. But part of me was thinking like, what does this feel like after two? Because there's no way the 200th one feels like the first one. They feel completely different.
Your brain probably breaks at some point, switches off. But in terms of the physical thing, I don't think it goes far enough to get past nerve endings.
Yeah,
I think it still hurts just as much every time.
But what I'm saying is though, is he like at a certain point you just numb to the idea of it because it's just like,
I assume psychologically you become numb to the fear of it because like after the first, probably after the first 10, you know what you're expecting, right? Like I imagine at first it's worse because the fear of how bad's it going to be, and then it gradually building up and getting worse as it rips open. But after a point, it's like what it's going to feel like. Yeah,
I assume there's a shift every once in a while, because by the time you get to the end, there's like bits of skin just hanging off and stuff. I have to imagine when it gets to the point where it's going straight into flesh and it's not just making a cut in the back, that's a new phase that feels
probably
distinctly different from what was coming before. But the whole thing, and then he talks about how it was a canvas. So in that moment, he was creating art, like between him and Jamie, and I'm like, this is serial killer talk. That's what that is.
And this is where, because they cast like a pretty good actor for this role, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think up till this point, it's kind of been small little things here or there. Like obviously had a big chunk in the first episode, but that was just ultimately could have just been a guest role.
Do you know what's so funny is that this makes sense to me because I remember in the first episode seeing him thinking this looks like a guy that normally plays villains, and then obviously by the end of the episode we get the the other version of him, and I'm like,
it's interesting. Yes. I don't think I've ever seen him play a villain before.
Really, there's something about his face that just looks villainy to me.
I get it, but I think I've seen him in a few things. I don't think I've ever seen him as a villain.
And I'm sure he's lovely. Like, I'm not trying. Like, I'm sure the actor's lovely.
Yeah, like, hey, some actors are just do great at playing roles. There's nothing wrong with that.
I guess I'm thinking like he's like an Alan Rickman kind of quality where he seems to fit villains more than. And that's obviously Alan Rickman had some good non-villainous roles as well. He did, but. Like he was cast as a lot of villains because he had that kind of look.
He was very good at it as well, yeah. And I think the same here. I think he's very good at this. I think this episode proves why you cast someone like this for this role, as opposed to just being it's a small little role, whatever I'll do. But like,
and there's
because you've got to be able to pull this off. Because to pull off a monologue like that, where you are talking about being utterly horrific and just being a monster. But pull it off by saying, "Oh, it's a work of art," and make that sound convincing, like he believes it.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
And there's also that scene where you think he might slit the guy's throat for cutting him a little bit when he was shaving.
Yeah, and then he just gives him a little shave, basically.
Yeah, but he clearly wanted them to be scared of it. Like that was the whole point of doing it. That was it's all just intimidation. So. Basically, she starts saying like, "Yeah, but you could still be a good man, and you've been here too long, and you've been in all this like warfare and fighting, savages and things like that." And he says, "Oh, maybe my first good act can be helping you get home." And they stand up, and she's happy. And I wasn't so much thinking that it was necessarily going to go down a redemption arc here, even though I considered that obviously that was a possibility. I was thinking maybe more what it was maybe going to do. Is that Jack was going to become like infatuated with her and be obsessed with her, and it wouldn't be like a two-way thing. It wouldn't like Claire wouldn't obviously be raped, but the idea because obviously he tried to rape her when he first saw her, so clearly he is physically somewhat attracted to her in some way. And I thought that maybe him saying here when she says that he's made her happy with this choice, and he said that that's a new kind of feeling. I thought, oh, is that where we're going with this? Is he going to become like, this villainous guy who wants to keep her for himself, and like all the devious plots we could go down with that route, which would be really sinister that she's this guy with the same face as her husband is this controlling I don't know what you call it, but that
was definitely a route they could have gone down.
Yeah, so someone in power who, especially in this time period, can like, effectively like force her to marry him, and then like she could be this like wife under like arrest effectively, and be trapped in that kind of situation. Not that I actually thought it was going to be her trapped for a long time. Obviously, I expected that Dougal and the others would maybe do something or whatever, but that would be his intention, and that's maybe what his driving force could become. I don't think it is at this point. He could still become obsessed with her. Like that's still a possibility.
It definitely could, yes.
Yeah.
But not in quite the same way as you were maybe thinking during that scene.
Yeah. I don't think he's romantically obsessed right now, but I could see maybe the chase and the thrill of chasing after her might form into like a sexual obsession as well.
I can definitely see it being a case of, oh, she got away, hurt his pride by escaping and undermining him.
Well, in the way he talked about creating art with like Lashy and Jamie, at what point, the way he like views the world is kind of skewed and awkward. At what point does he become in love? Like, does he fall in love with her because she's like a good opponent, because she's good at getting away and like,
yeah,
like I must say, I don't know if it's going to go down that route, but there's a lot of possibilities for how he could become kind of like obsessed with her in a romantic way, in a very unhealthy, like he won't take no for an answer romantic way. So. But he's evil enough that I buy that like it could go that way.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, but he punches her in the stomach, and then if that's not dark enough that he's going to like hurt her, is that he calls in the young soldier who was shaving him earlier, the one who's clearly scared of him, and says, "Have you ever kicked a woman?" And he's like, no. And he's like,
why would I have done that?
And he's like, oh, it's good. What was the line he said? It says like good for the spirit or something like that.
Freeing.
It's freeing. That's what it was. Which that's maybe the darkest line he says in the whole episode. Is it's freeing. In the context of what he's saying about, that's like, wait, what? And obviously the guy like comes over and just gives her like a little tap, basically, just like as light as possible without it being like an obvious.
Being nothing.
Yeah,
it has to be. Like, it's objectively a kick, but not a hard one.
He's pulling back a lot, and then obviously Jack's not happy with that and says, "No, I told you to kick her." So this guy is being forced, and it makes you feel bad for him. This is like, other than Claire, obviously, this is the first like truly sympathetic English character where I'm like, oh no, I kind of feel bad for this guy. This guy is probably going to be quite awful in the long run because he's been subjected to all this. Like, this is going to like mess with his brain, and
and he obviously doesn't have the guts to stand up for himself against this superior officer who clearly is a bit unhinged.
Yeah, and that's maybe something we'll see at some point. Is maybe, if not him, maybe somewhere down the line, some Englishman will actually do an act of kindness of some kind, to help her in a situation not dissimilar to this, and that could be quite a moment if it happens. But it's quite bad. Luckily, Dougal is up to see what's going on and helps her up.
Throws the law in his face.
Yeah, throws the law on his face, and demands that he be let go, and it makes it very clear what the law is, and because he's the brother of a laird, and all
this
of
is their land.
Yeah,
basically you attack him now, and this is officially war.
Yeah, so he's like, okay, then we'll let you go, but she has to be at this camp tomorrow by 1 o'clock or whatever it was, for questioning, because we're not done, but we're done for today. So he lets them go. And at this point, I'm like, okay, this has been such a harrowing episode of like the psychology between like Claire talking to Jack and then Claire talking to the others before, and how not only does she stick up for Dougal when he's in the room, but the way she sticks up for the Mackenzies when he's not in the room, like, obviously says a lot.
Scottish in general, yeah.
Yeah, and talks about how, hey, you're kind of on their land, and they're like, we're on the King's land.
Yeah.
It's like,
She's like, oh, yeah, of course, that's what I meant.
Aye, the King's like, aye. So at this point, I was like, okay, I don't know how, like, this could have ended right there, and it would have been like a full meal of an episode. Like, I don't think it would have, if it ended with them riding away from here, that'd have been, yeah, okay, cut to credits, fine. But there's another 5 minutes, and this last 5 minutes really threw me for a loop, because Dougal takes her somewhere, a particular stream, right, that's quite hidden, for a drink and to clean up, and he stands like sort of next to her when she's taking the drink, and pulls out his dagger and holds it behind him and asks, "Are you a spy?" In fact, we didn't even mention at one point Jack tried to turn her into a spy by saying, "Hey, you're going to go and find out about this rebellion that's maybe forming," and he actually directly asks her if she's heard anything, and we know she has from the last episode, and she doesn't utter a word.
No, she says no, of course not. Why would they mention something like that around an English woman?
Yeah. So, but he says, "Are you a spy?" And she's like, "Really? We have to ask me that again?" And she's kind of like, this is the thing, she's not been able to prove it to him yet, but she's proven it to us that she's definitely, I mean we know she's not because she's from the future, but she's proven that even in the situation where she could have sold them out for cred so that they would be nice to her, she didn't do it. She had this sense of honor, and she's fundamentally a good person, so she's earned our respect for that choice. But he says, "This is the last time I'll ever ask you," and you get the sense that if he doesn't believe her, like, okay, well, that's it, he's just going to kill her, and that'll be the end of it.
But he does, because magic stream, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I think he says, yeah, this is a stream where you can't drink from this, and then you'll have to tell the truth, or it'll be clear if you're lying because you've drank from there. Obviously, that's what he believes. To some extent, though, all he's really doing is looking her in the eye and believing her when she says it.
Yeah.
But that's how he explains it, and she obviously scoffs at it and is like, "Oh, magic water. That's why you believe me."
Like, don't question it right now, Claire. Just go along with it.
Yeah. But he's like, "Yeah, but we have to go see that prick tomorrow," and he's like, "You don't have to see him again if you don't want to." And she's like, "Well, why? Like, how? You heard him. What about the laws?" And then he explains that, yeah, but if you become Scottish, then he can't force you, especially if you're on clan land. You can be protected under those rules. And I'm like, wait a minute, how does she like become Scottish exactly?
An age-old thing known as a Greek card.
Because I was thinking, wait, this is not like renouncing or like accepting a new religion. You don't just go in and okay, you can become a citizen of a new country with some time, I suppose, but it's it's not like, oh no, I'm renouncing whatever I believed before, and I'm now take your pick. But he's like, you'll have to marry one, and I went, and for a second I was like, are we going to do some awkward thing here where she has to marry Dougal, and then it's going to be awkward with Jamie because Jamie's in love with her, and we're going to do like
I'm so glad they didn't
weird
go down
triangle. And and they cut away before, like, because she says, like, am I going to have to marry you? And he's like, as funny as that might seem, or as tempting as I could be, I wouldn't be the one that I would nominate for the job. And so she's kind of like storms past them, and it cuts, and she's on her own, and she's sort of looking at this, marriage agreement.
Marriage contract, yeah.
And I'm like, oh god, are they going to like cut away before they tell us who it is? Because obviously we're all thinking it probably should be Jamie. It makes the most sense. But sure enough, Jamie comes over and they start casually talking about it. I'm like, this is really interesting, because obviously this show fundamentally at the center of it is going to be their romance, and that's fine. But I did not see them having a marriage for some like sort of
political convenience.
Yeah, like a platonic marriage before they admit they're in love. Like, this is definitely a different dynamic than I was expecting for this to develop from.
It is, but then again, at the time, this isn't that weird, right? To marry for convenience, in exchange for something, land, as opposed to because that's who you want to marry.
Yeah, certainly to the others, like to Dougal and the clan, like to them, this is even weird to just marry for a reason like this. But obviously Jamie clearly has feelings for her already, and like he's just kind of hiding it because he's maybe scared to say it, or because he's worried she doesn't feel the same way. I think obviously deep down she is developing feelings, but isn't ready to admit it to herself yet, because she's still under the mindset.
Not until she's willing to give up on going home to her husband.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, she still thinks she can get back to her husband. So this was a sweet conversation where she's asking, like, you're okay with this, and he's like, well, there's no one else, right? And obviously when she says there's no one that you're into, I was thinking, yeah, well, there's one person he's into. Lucky for him, it seems to neatly line up with what's happening right now. But he says that, yeah, but I'm also this wanted guy, and like most fathers don't want their daughter to date someone who can, or marry someone I should say, who can get arrested and killed at a moment's notice. So
is a fair point.
Yeah, so I'm kind of the obvious guy for the job. And they've had this this connection since she arrived. He's looked out for her, she's looked out for him. There's something there. And honestly, I wasn't expecting her to casually bring up virginity like the way she did, because she just sort of comes out with it. Does it not bother you? I'm not a virgin. And obviously in the context here, he knows that she was married, and he's obviously under the impression that he's dead. But the idea is that she's previously married. Obviously, from a modern context, like that may not necessarily have to be the case, but in this case, what is true? She was married. But yeah, in this time period, as for all the bragging that a lot of the men do about sleeping with a lot of women, it does. This is a time period where men are supposed to want to marry virgins. That's kind of the.
It's supposed to matter.
Yeah, it's supposed to matter, and it's very obviously a completely unequal, stupid balance, because the men all want to have casual sex all the time, but then only want to marry a virgin, which, there's a reason why that never really ever truly worked.
Yeah.
Because it's, unfeasible. That would make it fair, but you'd have to have like so many more women on the planet to fulfill those apparent requirements for society.
You would, and I'm willing to bet that there were.
At the time?
Yeah. With the amount of men specifically that would go off to fight.
Oh, and die. That's a good point. Yeah, okay.
So I'm actually willing to bet that while the birth rates would have still been equal, more or less 50-50, the actual population rates, I guarantee,
that's an interesting
probably
point,
more heavily weighed in favor of women.
That doesn't make it any less sexist or
no,
unfair,
it doesn't. I'm just saying that if that was your argument for how the only way it could even mathematically work.
Is that mathematically the justification for men having multiple wives in old time periods? Because a lot of the men died, so there was just like, oh well, if the men don't take more than one wife, then these wives can't get husbands. That's just how it works.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if that's part of how it came about.
Let's be honest, it was just sheer greed and hubris and
part of the argument.
Okay, part of the argument, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the way it came up was just kind of interesting, and then it was actually oddly kind of sweet him just hitting back with it. Well, I'm okay with that as long as you're okay with the fact that I haven't had sex, and it was kind of like, oh, that's actually kind of given how much they're bragging to each other about all that. No, although admittedly, now that I'm thinking about it, Jamie never really bragged
he's
about it.
He's never around during those scenes.
Or he is, but he just kind of stays quiet because he was there during some of the last episode when they were around the campfire, telling stories. And obviously, most of their other stories are all fake. So, but there was something oddly sweet about him, kind of like, in a society where they would all mock him for this, and they would all probably give him absolute shit because this is obviously a toxic masculine nightmare where they all have to like show how much of a man they are constantly. He couldn't say that to them, but he felt comfortable saying it to her. And that's kind of
a big admission.
Yeah, so it's a genuine moment, particularly in this time. I mean, it's just a big admission today still to an extent, but it's definitely bigger in this time period.
Yeah.
So, I thought that was a sweet moment. And then, she's still not happy about having to do it, and she storms off. So they might still swerve us and not go through with it, but...
I suspect that they will. One way or another, she'll come around.
What I'll give this show credit for is that it's moved through a lot more developments in these 6 episodes, and I think I expected this quickly.
It has, and I'm glad it's avoided a lot of the obvious traps that would make this feel like kind of TV cliche. Like you were talking about, would you go through the whole thing of they'll marry her to someone else, even if not Dougal, just someone else, and then we have to go through the whole thing later with, well, Jamie's right there. Now, there's still an awkward story to tell, right? With that, okay, we can explore those feelings between them later, and this is kind of out of order.
And it's not even like a super original story trope either. Like, there's definitely other stories where two people fake a relationship and then fall for each other. That's like a thing that happens. It's a little bit different
Absolutely.
here, I suppose, in the sense that one of them is clearly already into the other, right? Jamie's clearly already into Claire, but so it's a little different.
Again, has probably still been done plenty of times.
In fact, it's actually the plot of Bridgerton, of all things.
There you go.
That I'm thinking about it.
There you go. But the point is,
Cindy.
The easy thing for TV specifically, especially, I know this isn't, but especially network TV, would have been, let's make this into a triangle.
That said,
let's choose one of the other hot young guys and to marry her off to. And Jamie can be on the sideline.
That said, if the husband is Angus, then it works for comic relief's sake.
That's true.
Because then it's not like an awkward love triangle. I mean, it's kind of a triangle, but it's a triangle purely for comedy's sake.
Yeah. Which again, I would have been fine with that decision because it would have been funny.
Yeah, it would have been funny. Yeah.
But in this case, I'm glad of the route that it took. That it still has interesting character beats to tell, and cuts out the awkward cliche stuff that we would have had to go through first.
Yeah. No. So I was generally surprised by this, at least so early to do this. Like I was, if you had said back in episode 1, make predictions for the show, I would not have called Claire and Jamie are married potentially by episode 7.
Yeah, you'd have maybe gone with the end of the season at best.
Even then, I'd have said no. They'll admit they have feelings by the end of the season.
Which might still take that long.
Yeah, but that would have been my guess, and that's still, like you say, might still be true. But I'm genuinely shocked by this, and maybe this is a good sign that the books that they're basing the material on, is a constant progression in story. It's not just sitting in a status quo for too long and milking it for everything it's worth.
Yeah.
So that's good, and I think it did show, as much as most of the English characters in this were just evil or shitty. Either because they're monsters like Jack is, or they're just like dicks like the general is. These ambitious dicks who are like basically talentless and have no honor. There was a little bit of layers in showing the younger guys who maybe could potentially become good men, but obviously they're being they're being ruled by people who are shitty.
Obviously the lieutenant who we actually kind of met last episode, and then there's the one other younger one.
Yeah, I believe the one we met last episode, I do believe that he was doing everything he did out of honourable reasons. But clearly, obviously, once he takes her back to the others, it's like, okay, now it's their...
It's interesting, because again, with him, I still don't think it was I don't think he believes in being as malicious as like the general and the others around that table did. He was kind of just, it's peer pressure. It was like he kind of just has to go along with it because he made a point of trying to kind of be civil.
Yeah, because he even says, I think he's the one that says, oh no, Mrs. Beecham here tells us that she's been treated very nicely by the Mackenzie clan. He kind of passes on that information.
He's trying to be reasonable. Again, like I say, he definitely joins in on the jokes a little bit, but I think significantly less is probably the way I took it was more just enough to get by and still be part of the group camaraderie. Just like because he has to be in part of that group for his own sake.
Yeah. It's obviously, like things change because people are willing to challenge things. Obviously, it's a little bit different in the hierarchy of a military system because someone's outranks you and will make your life miserable if you do. But at a certain point, also, you kind of want people to take that risk anyway because that's what affects things.
So I think he's one of the better ones by a reasonable margin, I would say.
I got to the scene where they're all making fun of Dougal, and I was just like, oh my god, these are all evil pricks. Like, oh my, this is heaven. English are the villains of this to such an extent.
That's the interesting part. You say they're all evil pricks. I disagree.
Most of them so far.
I think Frank is an evil prick.
Yes.
Or Jack. Whichever one is.
Frank's the husband.
Frank's the husband. Jack is an evil prick. I think the others are bad people. Yes. I don't think I'd go as far as to call them evil just yet.
Okay.
Again, based off of this episode, based off of their actions here specifically.
Okay, I will say they're politically corrupt and are part of a system that is oppressive, and are quite happy to willingly stick with their ignorance and go along with that.
Yes.
Because it makes them feel bigger and better.
Yes, definitely agree with that.
There you go.
But unfortunately, there's someone in the room who is actually evil, which makes them look better in comparison.
Yes. But it's funny all of a sudden, though, because there's certain points in this episode where you feel like Dougal's the one ally she's got in the room. And you kind of like, all of a sudden, even though there's been obviously some animosity between them, and because he's been suspicious of her, it's like, he's her lifeline. And he might be the hero here who's able to save her and looks out for her. And given the end of the episode where he's willing to believe that she's not a spy anymore and is offering these ideas to protect her, it's like, oh, he's kind of on board now. So how does this relationship progress now that, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Dougal is like a one-season character and like has a big death at the end of the season or something like that. Like, it wouldn't shock me if that's where it goes.
Yeah. Like I said, I still think it was maybe more likely that he was going to take over as the Lord. But
it probably is, but
again, maybe if something happened to both Dougal and his brother, would that bring
Jamie back
in? Yeah,
I don't know. I think I had the thought because we're progressing so well with this like arc with him about his relationship with Claire that I could see it being done by the end of the season, just in time for him to have a big heroic like moment and die.
I think either way though would be a dramatic shift for his character in terms of his relationship with Claire. Like if he's alive but has to take over as the Lord, and that's a fundamental shift in that dynamic still. Yeah,
no, it's interesting. Actually, there was a comment on YouTube that told us something that was in the first book that was not in the show, so it's not a spoiler for the show. And on the one hand, I'm like, that's so stupid, I understand why they didn't put it in. But on the other hand, they're cowards.
Oh god, what was it?
Apparently in the book, Claire meets the Loch Ness Monster.
What? Now the thing is, if we're willing to accept this world with magic time travel stones,
yes, yeah, exactly.
Like, I think objectively I have to then go, well, I guess the Loch Ness Monster isn't that much of a stretch.
And it's not even that magic. I mean, it's just a creature, effectively.
It is. So if I'm accepting that as the premise of the show, which clearly I am, I have to be on board with the fact that can also be real.
I'm sure it's done tastefully. Maybe it's like she sees something in the water, and it's like, I'm assuming it's not she goes out of the water and has a conversation with Nessie.
No, I mean, can you do that tastefully? I'm so glad they didn't do that.
Yeah, it is worth mentioning sometimes, just on the dialect and stuff. Sometimes when Dougal and the others are speaking really quick, they'll slip in like Gaelic words into the English, and sometimes I don't understand what they said. Just for the record, like it's not like it's completely. But that said, though, you do see this with other things. There was a great example of this a few years ago. It might even be like it's not a decade ago, but it's maybe over 5 years now. There was like I don't know if it was like an award show or something, but Pixar did this thing, or no, I think it was just Disney in general did this thing where a bunch of the princesses were having a conversation together from all the different movies, and
was this not in? I think it was in Wreck-It Ralph, wasn't it?
Was it in Wreck-It? I don't think it was in a maybe it was.
Sure, it was.
But it definitely got released online because everyone was talking about it, right? And everyone was like commenting on it. But basically, the character from Brave, whose name I can't remember, Meredith, I want to say, she says something really quick, super Scottish, and the joke is that none of the other characters can understand her. And I remember just talking to other Scottish people at the time, feeling weird about it because I understood every single word she said.
It was in Wreck-It Ralph too.
Oh, okay. But the clip went online and went viral, like, I think when it was coming out then. Because everyone...
was 4 years ago. So.
Oh, okay, 4 years ago, okay.
Yeah,
but...
I do remember that, yeah.
Yeah, it was just funny because she said things like Aldrin, which means dad and stuff, and it's like everyone else can understand it, so that was pretty funny. But yeah, so it was a good episode. So.
Yeah, it was. I think it's probably my favorite episode yet. It's arguably the smallest in scope, but I thought
heavy in a character level though.
It was, and it gave us a villain for the show now. Obviously, we were assuming he was the villain in general, but
I am surprised. And admittedly, it's 16 episodes, so I don't know how I'm going to feel necessarily by the end of 16 episodes, but it feels very well paced so far. Where I appreciate that we didn't see him for like 3 episodes, and then we got him back here like this, and like a big introduction to him.
He's the sort of guy where you don't want him around every episode to diminish that effect. Exactly.
Yeah, you don't want like the Joker around every Batman issue or episode.
Yeah,
diminishes his value. So, no, have him be this thing that's like hanging over everyone for a long time, But this idea that she's now effectively a fugitive, at least in the eyes of Jack.
It is, and the idea that they've found this loophole to have to bring her to the,
which is only going to make him want her more.
It's just going to make him madder, and I'm like kind of terrified for what his reaction's going to be, in a good way.
Yeah, I was surprised if he starts just burning down villages, like on the hunt.
Retribution.
Yeah. How dare you mock me, woman, kind of thing.
Yeah. If he gave Jamie all those extra lashes just because he didn't give in to the punishment in the first place.
Yeah.
And that was just, again, that was just the lashes. What's it going to be like when it's something like this?
Yeah, and it's also fascinating as well. And you could argue it's just a touch on the contrived. No, it's not really, because he's the main guy in the area. But the idea that he's the one who actually did all this to Jamie, meaning that Jamie's also got like a direct link to him. But it does work in the sense that it is going to be fascinating when I totally believe that, well, yes, he will, like, if he ever has to fight Jack, there will be an element of, okay, this is also for himself as well, because what he did to him. But I also think there's some interesting dynamics to it, where I almost completely believe that Jamie will do it first and foremost for Claire, rather than himself first. The fact that he's
to save Claire rather than his own revenge.
Yeah. And the fact that he may get revenge is okay. Yeah, sure. He'll take it. he'll get that silver lining, but that won't be the sole purpose.
It won't be what he's there for. No.
Yeah. Because he's a hero, and he's a good character, so he has to have qualities that we care about. So no, I think it's doing a good job. It's funny because before we started this, everyone thought I was going to hate it because it was a period piece, and I
also thought you might hate it.
I thought I would. And I think this is just a reaffirmation to me that I can have genres, and this goes for everyone. Everyone can have genres or story concepts that they prefer, whether that be a full subgenre, whether that just be the type of, like, say like time travel stories, so you gravitate towards time travel. Fundamentally, good writing will always be more important than concept or premise.
So what you're saying is there's an anime out there for you.
That's how it's made, though. Anime is how something's like. Anime is not a genre. Anime is an entire medium.
That's not really true, because animation's the medium, and anime is the genre within that. It's a style.
Anyway, I do think that's a good statement to live by. Is that good writing is always more important than premise.
It is.
It can always trump the premise. So, while there's obviously going to be things that I gravitate towards more, there's always examples of things that I don't typically like that I do like because the writing is just that good that it doesn't matter.
It's the sort of thing as well that if anyone who watches us do the TV news show where we'll read a description and a lot of time we're like, I mean, it sounds okay, not really for us, but also with the right writing and direction, you know, it has promise.
Yeah.
This kind of proves it.
Yeah.
But if we'd read just the description for this, you would probably go, yeah, that's not really for us.
Yeah, Breaking Bad's the example I always go to. I mean, you tell me the Breaking Bad premise, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't really get much from it. But then you watch it, and you're like, oh wait, this is one of the best TV shows of all time. I'll keep watching. Thank you very much. You know,
someone at work told me the other day they got bored during season 3 and gave up.
Season 3.
Season 3. Yeah,
that's the best season.
I know.
That's the season.
Yeah, I know. I do have to rethink my friendship with that person.
Oh no. Oh no. I can't. Yeah. All right, that's our thoughts on this episode of Outlander. Let us know what you thought in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. You know, give us a like and, you know, subscribe. Did I say that already? I don't know if I did.
I don't listen to you.
I don't know. Anyway, that is everything. You can also support, of course, all the content by hitting the super thanks button below the video. Go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, where you get some bonuses for supporting us, including the $5 tier, get early access to some stuff, including these Outlander reviews. So go and have a look and see if you're interested. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you very much for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. And if you have any, how do I put this, biblical problems, consult your local Yellow Pages and look up Father Bain, yes, I will help you with demonic possessions, yes.
You're becoming a biblical problem.
For you.